in the lane, moving fast, hey. Let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, hey.
Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by Denim. As a business owner myself, I personally know the importance of financial stability and preserving cash flow to help navigate through any freight market. With Denim's comprehensive service offering, you now have an all-in-one financial partner whose platform includes factoring, payments, freight audit, document collection management, and analytics, which help keep your business financially healthy and increase your team's time to focus on revenue-producing activities. You can also take advantage of Denim's free credit check, which they perform on all of your customers. And Denim will proactively reach out to you if they spot any signs of credit deterioration. Finally, Denim always pays your carriers first. As a broker, this is imperative to preserving your credit score in the market, which ultimately helps you become a broker of choice to your carrier partners. Are you ready to learn more? Visit denim.com to schedule a demo today. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Friday, everybody. We're going to jump right in. I got a very special guest for you guys. And, you know, we're going to be talking about M&A today, right? What's going on in the freight market from that perspective? How can companies position themselves? There's already been a flurry of activity happening so far, and we're going to get caught up on that. And I have nobody, there's nobody who's more qualified to talk about this than my friend, Spencer Tenney. So Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Chris, good to be with you, my man.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, the last time we saw each other in person was out at Freight Fest in Houston. I mean, it's been like a year and a half now at this point, and I think we've missed each other on the road since then.
Well, it's not because we haven't been on the road. I think it's just been we've just been busy. But I certainly love keeping up with what you're doing and appreciate all that you do for our industry.
No, I appreciate that, man. And you know, for me, I just like. In today's day and age, Spencer, everybody's got an opinion on everything, right? And it's kind of like it breeds a ton of confusion out there because, you know, you can go out and make predictions now. And, you know, if you have the right camera angle and lighting and mic setup, you sound, and I'm like ripping on myself here, you sound really educated on some stuff. And, you know, from my perspective, I always like to bring people in from multiple facets of the industry to come in and talk about their expertise. And, you know, when it comes to M&A, like this is literally all you do, right? Like this is your bread and butter. This is your jam. And this is why I want to have you come on and kind of break these things down. So, you know, how have things been looking, you know, from your perspective? Is there a lot of wait and see kind of right now out there? Any hesitation from that standpoint?
It really just depends on what your end markets are in this space. I think there's a lot of folks that are taking that posture right now, and understandably so, because there is quite a bit of disruption going on with the tariffs and the uncertainty about what that's going to mean moving forward. But still, as you mentioned, you don't have to be an M&A person to read headlines, and there's still quite a few announcements that are happening on what seems like a weekly basis. And from our vantage point, we're seeing a lot of folks that are going through just kind of a checklist. And part of that is just to understand, okay, do we have exposure because of these tariffs, and how might that affect interest in our business? And for some, it does make sense to kind of continue to wait and see what's going on here. And for others that don't have that exposure, they're not hesitating to get into this space and try to advance their position through some type of strategic transaction. So, and so it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I think we've been highly encouraged just based on the volume, but also the size of the deals that are actually getting done. Even with the most recent deal that with EPS and Andlauer Healthcare Group, that's a great kind of testament about some of the deals that are getting done, both in size, both in terms of their strategic significance. So for us, it's just it's not a one size fits all. It's just do your homework. How does this affect you? And if it makes sense, get in the game.
Do you think with the amount of like I'm more of like, if anybody's looking to build out their service offerings, do you think, Spencer, there's a lot more, hey, let's just buy something as opposed to building it? Or do you think people are going to be more inclined to build it internally now with the rapid changing landscape of AI tools that are out there at their disposal? Do you think it'd be easier for, do you think that that's a lot of an internal discussion, or are these guys like, hey, with this, let's just buy an existing AI company and then roll it up inside of us?
Well, I think I think business owners in our space right now are kind of inundated with options to advance their current position, whether that's via acquisitions, whether that's through organic growth, whether that's through using, or developing proprietary tech, endless set of options. And so I think what I'm seeing folks do is just, what is the surest path for execution? Because I think there's a lot of things that you could do, and you mentioned AI. So what I see a lot of people are like, if that's kind of how they're wired and they have a bent towards that type of technology, then I see a lot of folks leaning in pretty hard and say, hey, we can shine and we can pace the competition based on this is kind of like what we're wired to do. And other folks that don't live in that world, don't want to live in that world, they're much more inclined to go out and buy that technology or buy a competitor who already has it to supplement basically the same effect. And so to me, you can kind of get there a number of different ways. I think that because we're in such a challenging marketplace and have been for a long time, compressed margins, it's like, and every day of the week adds a new challenge to consider. And for that reason, folks are being very diligent about not committing themselves or their capital to things that they don't feel like they can execute at a high level. And so that's where we start seeing, like, if in doubt, buy it. That's what's happening.
Do you are there any sectors of the industry that you feel like are at a higher likelihood for like a fire sale to come in? Is there any, like maybe it's maybe it's tech, maybe it's like you see a lot more exits from the trucking side of things, like the asset side of things? Because I mean, we're in a unique position where we're out, like it has to fit our vertical if we were to like entertain any form of strategic partnership, acquisition, or anything like that. But I'm starting to see a lot more trucking companies come up for sale here than I have over the last 12 months. And it's like, I would say a massive spike here in the last couple of weeks of opportunity that's out there.
And some of that is unfortunately a little too late, or too little too late. And I think this is what happens with a lot of folks. They get into a very, compromised situation, and some of that is of no fault of their own. It's just they had the wrong exposure at the wrong time. And so I think some of that, but also there's a large portion of folks in our industry that, listen, I don't mean to be critical, but the industry as a whole was artificially propped up by a lot of different things during COVID. And so folks that should have left the industry a long time ago have kind of lingered here. So I think some of this we can be reactionary to this, and I don't really see it that way. I think some of this is just pushing out operations that probably would have, self-elected out a long time ago due to cash flow crunches. Is just now, this is just, tipping point for some folks. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't really see any particular sectors. The tariff things has so many complex effects that you can't even really, I don't think anybody even, they might have thought they understood how it might affect them on the front end, but the way that some of this is playing out, there's just a lot of, both intended and unintended consequences through this, and people are trying to figure that out on the fly. And I don't think that there's any specific verticals that you can just say, like, this one is the most. Obviously, there's certain things like in the auto space that gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And then, kind of your consumer products and some things like that have exposure in that area. But all in all, it's just a tough time. And so I think that if you've kind of got to the place and you have exhausted your operating reserves, you don't have any volume, and you're not, proactively going to try to offset some of the rising costs in this industry, it's understandable why some folks are, why we're seeing these bankruptcy announcements in mass, basically.
Do you think, obviously cash flow is king, and I try and talk about this on the show. I don't know if enough people realize how financially fragile most businesses are, right? And they can even be established when it comes out there, because it's like your cash flow, managing your cash flow is of the utmost importance. But if we're going to talk small business, which is, if we're talking from a scale perspective, that is like 90% of the transportation industry, whether you're a trucking company or a freight broker alike. And, I don't know if enough people realize how most small businesses are literally 30 days from going out of business every single month, essentially, while they're trying to build up their cash flow. So have you ever worked, how can people work on improving that from that perspective outside of the just go sell more?
Right. Well, the reality is we've kind of gotten to a place where this industry, it's not your grandpappy's trucking industry anymore.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you need a certain amount of scale in order to squeeze out a meaningful amount of profitability from this industry. And so I think that, and I'm not trying to sound self-serving. I just think that this is what's true. You're going to see a massive shrinking in the overall number of operators, both on brokerage and on the truckload side, because the economics aren't going to make sense for people anymore. Most will elect out because it's just too hard for too little. They'll go do something else. And so, those that will be successful will either merge or they'll acquire. They'll do certain things to change the formula from which they can create consistent cash flow moving forward and have much more sustainability for the amount of risk that you actually have to, expose yourself to in this space, which is astronomical. So for me, I just think some people at some point, they just say, this is not worth the risk and the hassle, and I'm not going to do this anymore. And those that don't make that decision are typically doubling down in the form of a merger and an acquisition, because there's only so many pennies that you can squeeze out of a dollar. At some point, you have to change the formula, create synergies, purchasing power, economies of scale. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of folks move into.
Yeah, it's, margins are obviously extremely thin on a lot of sides of the industry at the end of the day, right? Like it's, I know that there's always this talk on who's screwing who essentially out there. And I just don't know if enough people are actually putting themselves in the seat of the other individual, right? Because some people are gonna be, oh, shippers are making all this money off of it. Maybe they're making a little bit of money off of it, but like that's why we're in business though, right? Like, I don't know if anybody who starts a business goes, God, I really hope to literally lose everything over the course of these next 6 years. People want to go in there. They want to build a sustainable company and go out with that. But I think that, we're at a unique time because you're like there was such a false sense of security for essentially 2021 through the beginning stages of 2023. There was a, astronomical amount of money that was being made out there from across the board. And a lot of people, I get it now, but I didn't always understand this, that like when times are good, you think it's always going to remain, right? Like you think I'm always going to make $1 million a year, no matter what. I don't have to change anything. You drink your own Kool-Aid. And I think like then you might expand too quick. Did you see that at all out there, Spencer, where you saw businesses maybe go way too fast into the expansion because they had elevated revenues and it was a historical time. So people probably spent a little bit more recklessly than they should have. And I know as a business owner, as somebody who's bootstrapped, that is a mistake I made. I thought that my revenues were going to remain at what they were for a lot longer than they did. And I increased my expenditures in certain areas. And I have since learned from that. And I have, course corrected and reduced my overhead by probably 30% over the last 15 months because of that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is why I love serving business owners, because the reality is nobody bats 1,000 on these types of decisions. And so there's a reason why America is the greatest land in the world, is because people are going out there and yes, there's a path to freedom of all kinds, for prosperity, but the exchanges, you have to be willing to take enormous risk in certain situations that have very little visibility on whether or not that's going to provide a sufficient return. And so And so I think that's what makes America great. That's what makes entrepreneur special, because not everybody can operate like that.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that, a lot of business owners beat themselves up, maybe yourself included, about like, hey, like I can't believe I did that, or whatever the deal is. But given the information, the time,
Oh yeah.
I think of a lot of people that were like, well, hey, I'm either going to lose money or I got to buy as much equipment as I possibly can right now. When there was total uncertainty about whether or not, when they would be able to get more equipment if they didn't buy it at that particular time. And many are, taking it in the teeth as a result of those decisions now. But at the time, like who could have possibly known that was, so all that being said, I'm saying I have great admirations for owners that actually are in the arena doing the work. Yeah. And rather than the person, the sideline reporter, calling out their mistakes along the way. But I do think that the reality is this: we're at a time in our industry right now where it is fragile, more so than ever. And so I do think that there are tremendous opportunities, but it's just very difficult to experience the opportunities with this space, in this space, without scale. And so that's where you're seeing a lot of people just trying to find out. I mean, problems that like shippers and everybody else that they're trying to solve, they're evolving every day. So I think the question is, are you still solving a problem that people are willing to pay for, right? That has not been commoditized. And so I think that's probably part of the issue, is just you can't stay stagnant in terms of your commitment to go solve problems that are worth somebody paying for. And I think that's the issue. Once what you're doing becomes commoditized, and if you're not adapting to the situation, that's where you get in trouble.
I think, to me, what's never talked about in data, out of everything that I see, and this is why it's like, I like the sideline reporter made me think of this, because I couldn't agree with you more on that, Spencer. Everybody's a Monday morning quarterback, but nobody puts themselves in the emotional roller coaster of being an entrepreneur and what comes along with it and the decisions you make in the moment. There's never an emphasis on human emotions and human decision making, right? Because like you can sit there and look at everything in front of you and it can paint a very clear picture on what probably is going to happen, but you could have a founder who's maybe never been through that before, and they're going to go with their gut, and their gut might be wrong in that. And then there's also the inevitable decision-making weight that comes of, if I'm wrong, I lose everything. And then that breeds hesitancy in those moments, right? Because the emotion that most people never understand is when you have everything on the line, when you're building a business and you don't have a 401k, you don't have a retirement, you have no salary that is guaranteed coming in as a business owner, and how that affects your ability to operate in the beginning stages of it, right? So it's like that's a weight on most people's shoulders that they will never comprehend. And they're always quick to judge of like, oh, I would have never done that. It's like, oh, really? Give up your salary, throw everything on the line and build up your dreams for a couple of years. And then tell me that exact same thing. that you wouldn't make that decision because you're wrong and you're lying to yourself in that moment. So I just want to point that out. And that's like, I was a lot harder on myself in the moment than I am now, because I am looking back and I'm like, dude, you're going to mess up, right? Like, you're going to make mistakes. That's part of it. And I also look at it as, fortunately, I learned really quick and I course corrected a lot sooner, and I didn't let it drag out a lot longer than I very well could have in those situations.
Yeah. And I think that's, one of the key characteristics of highly successful business owners, business and value creators, is that they move on from failure very quickly, and they learn and they apply, and they don't make the same mistakes twice. That's it.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you show me an entrepreneur who has not failed, and I'll show you someone who hasn't made any money at all.
Yeah.
So so I think that, to me, it's a badge of honor, but also with it comes responsibility. Like I said, like, if you're going to be an entrepreneur who likes to repeat the same mistakes, you're going to be very broke and very unhappy. And so I think that's what I love about our industry. Mm-hmm. And this comes across in M&A all the time, which is it's an amazing industry, but it's also highly unforgiving. And you have to be agile. You have to be able and be open to reinvention at any given time. And so, that's when we talk about, when you're in a market like this. My son listens to this Christian rapper, Andy Mineo. Okay. He has this line. He says, make moves or make excuses. And I love that line. And that's kind of how I think about people that are like, kind of in a state right now, which you can either make a move and attempt to advance your position, either through partnership, through merger, through acquisition, through, maybe some type of management services agreement, whatever, to try to change the economics, the cash flow of your company right now. Or you can make excuses. You can absorb all those losses and just take it. And to me, that is not an option. That's never a winning formula in any arena of life of any kind. And so, so to me, like right now, I think where I see folks doing great things is they're educating themselves, they're surrounding themselves, either in formal or informal best practice groups. They're moving quickly, they're making decisions. And I think that, like, it's just one of those things where, like, you can make you can deliberate for months and ultimately arrive at a great decision that was 3 months too late. At some points, like, you got to move and you got to be decisive and you got to make some decisions. And so not everyone are going to be right, but delayed, a delayed good decision is the same as a wrong decision in most cases in this type of environment. So I think folks that are protecting and building business value right now, they're being decisive with the information that they have available, and they're making moves.
What could a business owner do? Say they're, I don't want to call it at their wit's end, or maybe their plan was, within 5 years they were gonna sell. What could a business owner do today to start making their company maybe look a little bit more appealing out there?
Well, I always start with kind of the basics. And so, like, a lot of folks, and they'll come to us and they're like, hey, I want to sell my business. And I'll ask for some information, and they don't know this yet, but I'm immediately, and my team's immediately assessing whether or not that they have some basic functionality to perform at a high level in a actual sale environment. So to the degree that they can return the right information and return it in the desired time frame, which is almost immediately on demand, we're assessing whether or not this is someone that, number one, well, is someone going to be interested in this business? Number two, are they going to present in such a way that will allow them to not leave money on the table? And so that's what I want to know. So, like, we want to make sure that there are some basic financial reporting disciplines in place that you can satisfy the most basic things that an educated buyer is going to request at multiple stages within the process. And so for me, that's kind of like step one. And step two, we want to start looking at leadership, because ultimately when people are buying a business, they don't want to buy a job. They want to buy a business. So there needs to be structure, that leadership, job descriptions, and a meaningful amount of independence away from ownership. And so it's really important to think about who is that next level of leadership that's going to be driving the business moving forward. I remember a reference, quite often is, depending on the size of the business and depending on, know exactly, the size of your, the operators in your audience here, but, let's just say that if it is going to be a private equity buyer. I mean, the things that they want to know, and I share this all the time because I think it's tremendous advice. This was Pierre Matthew out of Blue Jay Capital when they bought a large 9-figure deal from us, Priority Courier Experts out of Minneapolis. And he was on my podcast afterwards, and I was just saying, like, how do you think about it? Like, what are you trying to assess within the first, couple of things that you're looking at as you're evaluating a company to purchase? And number one, he was talking about the leadership team, and he's like, I'm not interested in evaluating their ability to operate the business today. I want to know, like, what is their desire and what is their capability to operate the same business if it's 3 to 4 times the size today? Do they have the capacity to perform at that level? Because that becomes much more interesting. Because the alternative is a buyer has to come in and then substitute folks that are good employees but don't have the capacity to grow at that level. And that just creates more risk, which may not be attractive enough for a buyer to actually go through and complete a transaction. So, like, if you can de-risk the transaction on the front end by having an exciting level of leadership that can take the business forward without dependence on current ownership, that becomes very compelling and very easy to invest in. So I think that you talk about financial reporting, we talk about reducing dependence. Those are major things. And the other part about it is, things you can control. I talk about this all the time, and this is high sensitivity around this right now based on what's happening in the market. I had in my podcast yesterday, Jonathan Todd from Benish Law Firm, and we were talking about what's changed in diligence over the last, since what does Trump call it, Liberation Day with the tariffs?
Yeah.
So the biggest change in diligence, the way that buyers are evaluating sellers on the path to close, is on the customers, and they want to know they want to know concentration levels, but they also want to know their exposure to tariffs. But I think, like, customer concentration is something that owners and companies have control over. If you have a disproportionate amount of revenue in any one or a couple of different accounts, that is something that is high perceived risk, because obviously if that goes away, it's not even the same business anymore. Yeah. And so it doesn't mean that it's that it's dead on arrival, but people need to understand the relationship between customer concentration and overall valuation. And so, and it may not even affect the valuation of the company, but it will most certainly affect the structure of the deal. Nobody's going to write a, highest offer, in the market, all cash, when there's 90% concentration in one account or whatever else it is. So the solution is start to educate yourself about what is acceptable, and to try to think about your growth. It's like, well, if I'm going to grow, I can't continue to expand this particular account. I need to grow in other accounts if I'm going to grow, because otherwise I'm going to be disadvantaged or discounted because all that growth is coming from one thing. And it's also limiting the future pool of buyers, because some people will they won't look at it. If it's over a certain threshold, they call it like 70% or even 50%, they won't look at it. So I think that part of what I see owners doing that they can control: take care of your financials, start reducing dependence on ownership. And then if you have customer concentration, start making very specific moves to grow the business away from that current exposure. And in doing so, you expand the pool of potential buyers who would be interested, and you will enhance the quality of the offers that actually come in. And you will most certainly enhance competition, which will increase the value of the company.
No, I mean, that's phenomenal advice, right? And I feel like, and this is something that I see out there, even on from a business development standpoint, Spencer, is you get a couple of key accounts, and then the Pareto principle 101 rolls in, right? It's 80% of your entire revenue is with 20% of, is provided by 20% of your, or excuse me, what was it? I forget how it goes, but essentially it's that concentration that you're talking about, right? Like the 80% of your revenues are coming from just 2 people, right? Like there's no diversification that comes along from your book of business, and your risk factor is so high for failure at that point, because one, again, talk about human emotion. You say the wrong thing to the wrong person, all of that gets shut off instantly, and there is no chance of that coming back. And your overall, your overall value of your company and your book of business drops overnight, essentially.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like as an operator, as somebody who's trying to build up their business, I am very, very much paying attention to that number right there from our revenue standpoint on a customer by customer basis. And obviously it's lopsided as you're building, right? There's always going to be that. And that's why I say you never stop selling. You have to continue to lower that overall exposure number down to where it's like, hey, 25, 25, 25, 25. That would be phenomenal for you.
Yeah. And what I would add is the same principle is true with the source of your revenue. So if especially a lot of freight brokerages, you have like 1 to 2 rainmakers, and they're bringing in all the revenue, right? So it's like, so that's another kind of thing that an element of risk that you have influence over. So you want to make sure that, it's a great thing. If you have just a guy that's just crushing it, that's bringing all time revenue, I think that's great. But you need to understand that when it comes time to buy that, like, what are they going to be looking at? All right, well, what if that guy dies? So, like, what is his non-compete situation? Can he just walk with that book of business tomorrow? Or like, what does that look like? And so, so I think it's just really important as people prepare to understand, what do buyers care about? And so, like, they want to know about that customer concentration, but they want to know the source of the revenue. And just as importantly, they want to know, what are the opportunities to expand these existing accounts? So, for instance, owners that are doing a really good job, they understand what the needs are of their existing customers, and where their current limitations are. Like, and so what ends up happening is, if we're trying to build a sales strategy for our client, and we have an understanding of that, or our client has an understanding of that, it just helps us understand what buyers to target, who would be able to bring those capabilities, who might be able to contemplate different scenarios based on the synergies that would be created post-transaction. And that's just, I think that's just being very savvy about it. So, I mentioned Pierre Mathieu, and one of the other things in the podcast is he talked about, like, owners need to understand the core truths about their business, both what's good, but the good, bad, and ugly. They need to understand all of it, and they need to have data to support it. And that is more important than dressing something up and trying to make it look great. Owners that say, hey, here, they understand their core competencies, they understand the limitations, and they can talk about it and convey those truths with data. I guarantee you, like, especially like educated private equity investors, when they come across owners that are in that level of command of their own business, the imperfections actually become attractive, because now those can be converted into opportunities based on, data supported facts about what the problems are, but more importantly, what are the financial opportunities associated with solving those problems. And to the degree that the buyer can affect that, that's where the valuation scenarios become exciting.
Spencer, I mean, I could talk to you for hours, man, but like, this is because, for me as a business owner, like, I'm not like actively looking to sell, right? Like, I'm out here to, this is what I'm building for my career. But I know there's a lot of people out there who, their back might be against the wall. They might not know what to do next. And they are going to inevitably say, you know what, maybe we should just sell. Let's try and get what we can. Or maybe they've just hit that inevitable wall, Spencer, where they're like, I'm done, right? Like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I got to go try something new. Or, maybe they've built a really, really quality thing and they want to move on to their next quality project that they want to build out. Because there's a big thing of, that's what I love the most about founders, Spencer, is there's some of them who are like, man, I just like building stuff, and when it gets to a certain point, I want to go build the next thing,
Yeah. No, and I think that there are a lot of people that fit that description. And so I've seen a lot of folks, we're prideful people as entrepreneurs. I think that's part of what makes it work, but it can also be pretty dangerous. And so, to quote the movie Rounders, I always tell business owners, like, don't put in the pot what you can't afford to lose.
Yeah.
And because just because you were dealt a bad hand right now doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity to be an exceptional entrepreneur and immensely successful, just in a different context. So don't put yourself in such a hole that you can't go do that. Right. And so I think that's number one. I think every business owner that is in a hole needs multiple sets of eyes to help them see clearly what is happening. I was talking to a business owner the other day, and I was like, he's like, well, I have X amount of time, I can do this. And I was like, well, you're bankrupt. I mean, like, I don't know why you're not saying it out loud. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but like, I don't think you have any appreciation for how severe your situation is. I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars of debt, but in like no time. And whether it's denial, delusion, whatever else it is, I think we as owners have major blind spots on what's true in the moment. And so I would just encourage like a trusted friend, your circle, your CPAs, your attorneys. I would invite them into the conversation to speak honestly about where you're at, so that you can steward the situation as best as you possibly can. And again, make sure that you live to fight another day, whether it's in trucking, logistics, or in a totally different arena. But you got to have people speaking truthfully and directly in your life when you're in a moment of duress. And I think a lot of folks go months without that accountability and lose a lot more than they have to.
Yeah. Well said, Spencer. Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. How does anybody reach out to you guys to find out more about what you have going on?
Yeah, the best way, obviously, you can go to our website at the TenneyGroup.com. But honestly, if you follow me on LinkedIn, we're pumping out things multiple times a week of 10-minute content, just very consumable videos that will help you elevate your deal IQ, both as a seller and as a buyer. So I think those are the best ways to get in contact, and we'd love to be a resource for you.
Perfect. Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. That's going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. If you're feeling really ambitious after this one, which you should be, Spencer just literally laid out a masterclass for you guys to follow. Rank the show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you saw value, that's how your network's going to get value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.